Well, look, I mean, it's very interesting. I mean, yesterday the Prime Minister spoke and said our commitment to membership of the ECHR is absolute. Rishi Sunak, responding for the opposition, didn't query that in any way at all. He sort of made a vague reference in the election to, well, we might consider leaving. He never meant it. What I've been very struck by, Martin, is how similar the two parties are. There was a chap up earlier, Bob Blackman from Harrow East. I sort of thought, well, why is he on this side of the house? He'd be more comfortable on the other side of the house. So yeah, you know, I said, look, I don't believe that until you deport people, you will stop illegals crossing the English Channel. And how interesting that back in the days of David Blunkett, even up to the end of the last Labour government, we were deporting tens of thousands of people a year. So I suggested, for a bit of fun, wouldn't it be great to have a referendum on the ECHR? Because the country had voted to leave. This Parliament, I felt more outnumbered in the last week here than I ever did in Brussels. More Brexiteers in Brussels than there are in this Westminster Parliament. This is a Remainer Parliament, it's a rejoiner Parliament, it's a globalist Parliament, it's a Parliament totally unconcerned with massive population growth. So we may be, the five of us from the former UK, we may be very much in the minority with a few Conservatives having the guts to back us, but I think in the country we've got huge support.
And Nigel, you were heaping praise on David Blunkett, the Home Secretary in the Blair years, for being tough on deportation, but you're quick to point out you had absolutely no faith in this Labour government to follow in his footsteps. Tell us more.
Well, look, I mean, you know, Labour Starmer set out 6 key priorities for the general election. Immigration, either legal or illegal, wasn't even in those 6. And in the King's speech, immigration's mentioned twice, asylum's mentioned once. The idea that we're going to, you know, go after the gangs, I mean, what a load of baloney. We've been going after the drugs gangs for decades with almost no effect. And on legal immigration, they have nothing to say. Both main parties, in my opinion, are in hock to giant multinational businesses who want as much cheap labour as they can possibly get, and to hell with the social consequences. I mean, the reality is there'll be very little difference on this and many other issues between a Labour government and the last one led for 14 years and headed up by the Conservatives.
And Nigel, another big announcement today, the Bibi Stockholm, the first boat that Sir Keir Starmer has stopped. That's going to get the chop. RAF Scampton, RAF Wethersfield, looking like they're going to get the chop. And this can only mean one thing, Nigel. The hotels are also being closed down by the Labour Party. This can only mean one thing, the widespread dispersal of asylum seekers and illegal immigrants throughout the United Kingdom. Nigel, what do you think voters will make of that when, as Angela Rayner said, this is a responsibility for every constituency in Britain without them having a say?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, what's going to happen is those that are here illegally will all be just fast-tracked through the system and be allowed to stay. And what a contrast that is. Yvette Cooper will make illegals legal. The last Labour government, all those years ago, deported them in their tens of thousands every single year. And what can the Conservatives say? Well, actually, they were doing the same thing. 75% of those young men that crossed the Channel were being given asylum refugee status, albeit it took them a long time. And look, you know, I believe 2 things. One, that the exploding population is diminishing the quality of life of everybody in our country. And number 2, I've said for 4 years, this is a national security crisis. Keir Starmer even paid lip service to that during the election campaign. These are young, undocumented males coming from war zones, coming from places where terrorism is rife, coming from cultures of gang warfare, and coming from places where women aren't even second-class citizens. This is a social disaster for our country. You only have to look what's happened in Malmö and Sweden now in terms of rape and murder right at the top of the tree after they allowed a huge number of young males from the Middle East and elsewhere to go there. This is a social disaster.